Freshers Week is upon us, and up and down the country, first-year university students are attempting to embody our culture's most transcendent value, freedom. Released from the shackles of their family homes, students are attempting to discover their true selves, often at the bottom of a plastic cup filled with some kind of blue liquid that is mainly vodka. As they discover their true selves, many this week will be disappointed to learn that they are, just like the rest of us, desperately insecure bags of neuroses. It's just that they'll do it while dressed in togas and getting turned away from nightclubs with names like Tuxedo Paradiso, Sinferno, and the Grind Vortex. The idea that this is somehow an expression of freedom is hard to explain, but it's also hard to shake. I still remember my mother's parting words to me on my first day of Freshers Week. After a tearful hug, she said, and I'm not making this up, "Glen, just fly, Glen, just fly." And because sarcasm is my love language, I responded, "Yes, Mum, but only because you are the wind beneath my wings." I realized that that was a terrible thing to say, and I'm sorry, but please understand I was giddy with Freshers' anticipation. I could not wait to get out there and do what my mother had said, fly. And so fly I did, I suppose, into every experience, and it felt like freedom for about 36 hours. It felt like everything I had dreamt about, but soon I felt lost. I mean, in Freshers Week, you are physically lost. That's true, isn't it? You don't know where the library is. You don't know where the lecture theatres are. To be honest, 3 years later, I wasn't much the wiser on those issues, but you're lost physically in a new place, but you're also lost existentially and emotionally and spiritually. You just don't know who you are. And then comes the advice that shipwrecks precious souls the world over. The advice is, find yourself. Now think about that just for a second. You're lost, and you're advised to find yourself. Can you spot the problem? I mean, finding a lost person is never that much help, is it? If you're lost and you find yourself, you will only find that you're lost, which is no great find. If you're lost, what do you need to find? You need to find home. And when you're home, you can just be yourself. Well, the good news of the Bible is that someone from home has come to find us. You know, in every story that Jesus tells, we are the lost ones, and he is the great seeker, and he comes to place us in our true environment, in our rightful home, in the family of God. Jesus said, if the Son of the Father sets you free, you are free indeed. If you belong to this Son and are brought to this Father, then you are truly at home, and then you are free from need, freed from insecurity, free from descending into that hall of mirrors called the search for identity. You're found. You're free. Now you can fly. It's the 2nd of October. This is Glen Scrivener, and this is the LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, welcome to the show. LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, welcome to the show.
Hey. Hello, welcome to the LIVEcast.
I'm a professional.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than getting all the way through something like that.
I know.
And then fluffing it right at the end.
I'm just too lazy to do it again. So that'll do. To be honest, that was the best take. I needed to get my just right.
Oh man, yeah, that was all good. It was all good.
Freshers Week, eh?
Yeah,
Freshers Week. So for those not in the UK, freshers, I know that in America, your first year of university, you're called a freshman.
Yeah.
But we don't really use the term fresher apart from
not really.
that first week, really. Don't we? Yeah.
Don't they have other terms like
freshman, sophomore, junior, senior?
Okay.
That's how it goes.
Sophomore, is that your last?
Your sophomore is your second year.
Right.
And
where's
then
that word
junior,
come from?
then senior. Americans, help us. Help us. Why do you do what you do?
Just making up words.
Just freshman stuff. You know, I know this only because I've watched too many frat house comedies.
Yeah.
It's the only reason. Like too many Will Ferrell and movies like that. So yeah, Freshers Week, and it is quite a uniquely UK thing because, like, for instance, in Australia, most people live at home when they go to university.
Right. Okay.
Because in Australia, we actually like our parents.
So what's that like?
it's weird, isn't it? Whereas in the UK, if you live down south, you go up north, and if you're up north, you you go to university down south because you want to get away. You
Or
want
if
to
you live in Scotland, you stay there because you get paid
it's free.
for. Yeah,
because it's free. Yeah, but it's all about the free stuff, right? Yeah,
absolutely. It's about the free stuff.
Freedom. So there's this weird thing, this first week of university, which is known for being a drunken, debauched kind of vomit-strewn week that really exacerbates the town versus gown divides in all these towns.
This is gown.
Where, like nobody wants their, this population of fresh teenagers to be kind of, throwing up along
their streets.
Yeah. And certainly,
That's fair.
It's fair. You're getting old, man. You're getting old. And every year they just get younger, don't they? They just get younger. And I don't know, Freshers Week for me was a little bit like that, actually. After my mother said, "Fly, Glen,
Fly, Glen,
fly," I felt like I had, justification for doing just that.
Yeah.
And off I went.
You were asking me about Freshers Week. I can't really remember any specifics of Freshers Week, and that's not because I was so blindingly drunk.
Must have been a good one.
No, I remember turning up, because I lived in a hall on a campus. I was at Nottingham University.
Yes, far from your parents.
Yeah. And that was, I was in a hall, Willoughby Hall. But we all lived on corridors. So it was like 4 or 5 floors, and then corridors. So there was about 14 rooms on each corridor. So it wasn't like, some people live in a flat and there's like 3 or 4 other people and them in a contained space.
Yes,
Whereas
with the
for
one
us-
kitchen, and you're leaving the passive-aggressive notes.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yes.
Whereas we saved that for second and third year,
Yes.
like just in houses. But actually, I think there's about 14 rooms on each side of the corridor. So there's
Wow.
about 30 odd of you,
Yes.
along this corridor. So at the beginning, you were kind of. I remember the first few days actually hanging around with people, and you think, I never spent any more time with them after the first few days. You kind of then
you're
faction
right.
out, don't you? You divide
You're
out
right.
into the groups. You're like, I'm
Yes.
not sure this is going to work.
Yes.
It's not me.
If you're a student and you haven't yet, found your niche, don't worry. There's a long way to go.
But the main thing I remember is Freshers' Fair. So the
Yes.
Freshers' Fair was the kind of thing in the middle of the campus where you go in and there'd be all the different stands and stalls and whatnot. And it'd be different societies trying to get you to sign up and whatever. I think I joined, I'm not sure I actually paid to join. I went to the scuba diving society, Scuba Sock. Probably.
That was the first and only time.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I went along, and I'm not sure I ever went. I didn't do any diving, that's for sure. I did join the Christian Union,
Okay.
but basically the Freshers' Fair was a good opportunity to pick up loads of free stuff.
Yes.
So Domino's Pizza had a stand,
Of course they did.
giving out free
That's
slice of
shooting
pizza.
fish in a barrel,
Yeah,
isn't
absolutely. And I just we went round a number of times, just get your slice of pizza, go around the corner, eat your slice of pizza, back to the end of the
it?
queue.
Again.
Round you go.
And you thought you were fooling them. They just didn't care.
And we were in a catered.
Desperately to wipe the pizza sauce off your face.
So yeah, I remember I got a free spatula, wooden spoon. I was in a catered hall. I didn't need any of it, but
Free
I
spatula.
was like, "We've got a spatula. It's amazing."
Phoning home. Mum, you'll never believe.
So grown up
Free
now.
spatula. So I met my wife the first in Freshers Week.
Really?
So yeah, that was the first time ever I saw your face. And she had a green towel around her head. She seems to have a green towel around her head the entire time. Like she'd go to lectures, like having washed her hair and putting a green towel.
Was it love at first sight?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did she think of you?
It was
Do you know?
weird. No, I know exactly what she thought. She thought I was really, really weird, and she
Yeah.
couldn't. She. I think the first time.
You're a good judge of character, then. Is she?
Yeah. Actually, the way we met is I had an album. I had the Muppet Show album,
Yeah, of course.
but I didn't have an LP player. I had nowhere to play it. But she had the LP player, so that should have
It was
been.
meant to be. It's a sign.
It should have been. And like she was like, "Well, why do you want to listen to the Muppet Show?" And I said, "Because I really love the tune Mana Mana." I like put it on. Like, what do you think? And like she just thought I was weird, and she might have had a point.
Why, Glenn? Why?
She thought I was weird for a very long time afterwards. And I think she's coming around to me slowly. It's been a very slow burn. But the other Freshers Week thing, I met a girl, and this is like, because this is the Speak Life, LIVEcast. I think our listeners, they will understand this joke, but I wouldn't tell this ordinarily. But I met a girl, and I'd never heard of this name before, but it was sort of Scandinavian. I said, "What's your name?" She said, "My name's Heidi." And quick as a flash, I said, "If there were 2 of you, it'd be hell."
Oh dear.
Right. And then she said, "Why would it be hell?"
No.
And then I said, "Well, you know, because Hades." She said, "What's Hades?" And I said, "Can I introduce to you the biblical doctrine of hell?"
And this is Glen. He's a laugh a minute. So that...
She didn't know what Hades was.
Oh my word.
I thought I must have been like the 50th person to say this joke to her.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you get this all the time, but if there were two of you, it'd be hell.
Oh,
why?
gosh.
Because of Hades. What's Hades? We didn't speak again.
No.
In 3 years. In the next 3 years, unfortunately.
Wow.
But that was Freshers Week, and apparently Freshers Weeks are getting less boozy. That's the big news story at the moment. That I heard somebody say that 40% of freshers won't even drink in Freshers Week, which sounds extraordinary. 40%.
It just seems a crazy statistic, given my experience of what university was like.
I mean, the other 60% are really trying to make up for the 40%.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
But I would have said, you know, the idea of not drinking at university, or when I was there, was that you were a very, very small percentage of people who would not drink at all.
Yes.
And most people's attitude was, you know, we used to go out and stuff, and and people would say, you know, the next day, "Oh, did you have a good time?" And people would say, "Oh, it wasn't a very good time because, you know, I didn't get drunk." And that was the attitude, you know, unless you got absolutely, basically paralytic.
Yes. Yeah, must have been a good night.
Yeah, yeah. I say, can you remember it? No, therefore it must have been good.
But actually, there's more and more people, and partly this is, you know, I went to university back in the 1900s, Paul. Last millennium. We didn't have to pay anything, so that's a different, you know, attitude to everything. You can drink away 3 years if it doesn't cost you anything.
Can't afford to drink anymore. Is that what it is?
Yeah, and you know, it is. I mean, the millennials are you know, the millennials, Paul, the young folk. They are you know, generation sensible, and so like less sexually active, less getting drunk all the time. So but
isn't it funny though that the generation before, you know, when it's like lots of drinking, much more sexually active, people are like, "Oh dear. It's not very good, is it?" And now we've got this generation. People are going, "It's a bit weird, isn't it?" Weird. I mean, they're not drinking. They're not.
They're just wrong. Whatever they do, they're just wrong. And we'll see a little bit more about confirmation bias as we go on in the show. But it is true. You know, there's a girl who's just starting at Brighton University, who I know well, who lives in Eastbourne, and actually, it's a real opportunity for her to get into Christian things because she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to just go to clubs and get drunk, and she feels like a third wheel. And because of medication that she's on, she can't really drink. Right. And so, actually, going on to the Christian Union is a massive draw for her.
Forced through stuff because the thing is, it wasn't even because I remember like people, you couldn't even join a sports club and just go and, you know. So I remember like particularly the rugby club. The Rugby Society. Oh yeah, like the initiations and that kind of stuff was just
my goodness
horrific. You know, like, and I remember my wife's university. One of the guys, you know, coming back like head shaved and pretty much naked, and you know, you know, if you just wanted to go and play rugby, well, you couldn't really just go and play rugby.
No.
You had to be part of the culture.
Yeah, and actually, what would it look like to be a Christian witness in that situation, and how do you know? Just Coke for me, and difficult. But I think there are all sorts of opportunities that universities are taking, or Christian unions are taking advantage of more and more. That they're saying Freshers Week is a brilliant time to actually reach out because, you know, people don't have lectures to go to, and not that students often go to lectures beyond Freshers Week. I certainly didn't, but it is a great opportunity, and you know, I'm up to Cambridge tomorrow night to speak to their freshers, and and I'm basically going to be doing that monologue, basically, and just tacking on a bit of Luke 15. I'll find a bit of Bible to tack on to my monologue. Yeah. Start with the gags, top tip,
build from there.
So doing a little bit of Luke 15. That, you know, maybe you're like the younger son who goes to the far country and this is your idea of freedom. Or maybe you're like the older brother, which at Cambridge University is, you know, that's another temptation, to be the one who works hard in the field and proves yourself and gets respect. You know, that's,
sure.
But actually, neither of those are really going to give you the freedom, the name, the satisfaction that you're looking for. Come home, join the joy. you know,
Come
that's
to the feast. Yeah.
Come to the feast. That's basically the message.
Sweet.
Great to see so many people listening in. Christopher Dempsey says, that sounds like any Saturday night in Scunthorpe. Wow. That's really flying a flag for Scunthorpe. We're there. We are there.
We'll come.
Does Scunthorpe have clubs that are called things like Sinferno and Grind Vortex? I don't know. Probably. Is it bad that I thought up those names for clubs?
Pretty bad. Yeah.
I was quite pleased with Tuxedo Paradiso. Anyway,
man.
Anyway,
and James said John the Baptist was weird for fasting, and Jesus was weird for feasting. So
that's so true.
You can't win.
You can't win. And how did Jesus put that poetically? He says, you sang a dirge, and we did not mourn. You played the tune, and we did not dance. It's that whole thing.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. But there's a bit of truth to that in the context of university as a Christian. So I think we've maybe talked about this before, about if you go and you are very kind of, I'm not going to get involved in this, I'm not going to get involved in that, or like you say, I'm not going to drink, or maybe I'll just have okay, I'm not going to drink. That's a good example. Okay, and people kind of people do respect you for it. I found but you're always going to get that kind of it's a bit weird thing going on. But then of course, if you do drink,
right,
like if you have a drink, not getting drunk, people go,
right,
you having a drink?
Yep.
Like, terrible Christians.
It's tricky.
You're like, well, hang on a second. Like,
yeah.
So.
Yeah, which is the whole John the Baptist Jesus thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus came fasting, and you said he has a demon, and I came eating and drinking, and you say, I am a glutton and a friend of sinners. Oh, no! Isn't that great? Jesus always owns the kind of the label that he's called. You want to call me a friend of sinners? You just watch.
Alrighty.
Wait and see. Yeah. He's always doing that.
Turns out Christopher Dempsey's not actually been to Scunthorpe. He doesn't know.
Wouldn't know. Never been there. We've got CCTV footage. And Andy, why don't you play for us now?
Is this the beginning of a Speak Life trip to Scunthorpe?
Yeah.
So if you want to come, sign up at the
admission to Scunthorpe. Do we have any listeners from Scunthorpe? Do make yourself known. Say it proud. Go on. Come out of the closet. Brilliant. So that's Freshers Week. I think we've covered.
Done.
That's Freshers Week.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So, but do be praying for tomorrow night at Cambridge. Yeah, speaking to a whole bunch of students, and it's usually one of their biggest meetings of the year. And here's an opportunity for people to come home and join the joy.
And worth praying as well, just for Christian students going off to university, because they've got to find new churches, and actually that can be really tough. Like finding a place that you think you're going to settle into. Sometimes some places have got big Christian unions, some places haven't got very big ones. Yeah, and it's easy for people to slip through the cracks and just fall off the radar, and so it can make or break people, can't it? In some ways, so worth praying for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, last night we released a new video, so hope that you've all liked our page on Facebook and have subscribed on YouTube. Last night's video was called "What Would Make You Change Your Mind?" and really it was an examination of a great episode of Unbelievable that was out very recently, where Hemant Mehta, the friendly atheist, took on Sean Mcdowell, the Christian apologist. It was the two things that the other side gets wrong.
Yeah.
So they both had to come up with two things so atheists are always getting Christians wrong in these two ways, and then Christians are always getting atheists wrong in those two ways. And actually, those 2 points were really brilliant. But I kind of in watching it, I thought there was this overall theme of how open are we to changing our mind, really. And I think, having watched the video and thought about it some more, I think my conclusion is not very.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think, as we say, I think in the video, the reality is that that's not just one side or the other, because that was part of the debate. Part of the discussion was, Hemant felt, or the Christians or the theists, they're much more entrenched.
Yes.
Whereas if we, an atheist of Richard Dawkins, as he gives the example, present them with the evidence, they'll change their minds. And actually, we see Hemant himself later on talking about even he doesn't feel he would change his mind. And
no.
So both sides, sides was bad at each other in that sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sean McDowell came across as the most open to change. Yeah. Actually.
That's true, but then also we did talk about how, he says, doesn't he? If I saw the bones, someone brought the bones of Jesus, and it was definitely the bones of Jesus. I have to give my faith. But we talked about even then.
Yeah.
It's the head and heart thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The head kind of says, that's the rational thing, but the heart would still find that tricky. So,
should we have a look at an opening clip from this video, and then we'll discuss some more? What would make you change your mind? Convince you that you are wrong about something. If you're really committed to one side, how do you come to the conclusion that you might need to switch?
Have you noticed that our caps have actually got little pictures of skulls on them?
I don't, so...
Hans, are we the baddies?
And what about on the biggest question of all, the question of God? What would persuade you to switch from one side to the other? That was one question among many debated on the excellent program Unbelievable by Hemant Mehta, the friendly atheist, and Sean Mcdowell, a Christian apologist. Here's the host of Unbelievable, Justin Briley, putting the question.
Do you feel like you're open to believing if you had, I don't know, the right kind of evidence in front of you, that sort of thing?
Yes, and I think every atheist would say the exact same thing. Of course we're open to it. That's the whole point. This isn't a dogmatic belief. Sure. That's the other side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Well.
Of course I'm open to hearing it. And by the way, I'm not just saying that to get a laugh, but I have heard Christians ask the similar question.
Sure.
If I showed you evidence that you were wrong about your beliefs, would you change it? And they will say, no, I believe this stuff is 100% true.
And whatever the evidence, right.
Nothing will change my mind.
What would you...
Of course Hemant Mehta would change his beliefs, not like those dogmatic Christians. Well, let's see how Sean Mcdowell answered the same question, put to him right at the end of the debate.
Psychologically, if something horrible happened to my wife or my kids, I think I'd be fooling myself if I didn't say that might make me doubt and question God. I don't know if that would make me give up my belief, but that might make me doubt. Look, the reality is I doubt my faith all the time. I live in doubt. I doubt everything. It's the way I'm wired. If I didn't doubt, I wouldn't write books and do research. It's just the way I'm put together. So I do doubt things. I think what would cause me to give up my faith is if I thought, number one, the resurrection was explained away. The heart of the Christian faith is the resurrection. And I find the evidence for that compelling. So if they found the body of Jesus, I would give up my faith. I think I would have to.
And Paul said he would as well. St. Paul,
1 Corinthians 15:14, he would.
To be honest, Sean does not sound that dogmatic. He sounds pretty open. But what about Hemant? Is he saying that people like Sean are more dogmatic than some of the new atheists?
I guess my question would be are you saying our side's more dogmatic than like Dawkins is? Because
yes,
Dawkins and Dennett seems about as dogmatic as you can get.
I think you're wrong.
Tell me why. I'm interested to hear.
I think Dawkins would say the same thing I just answered you, not to speak for him, but to say, no, show me the evidence. I think he gets more attention, and the people want to hear what he has to say a lot more, so he comes across in a lot of ways that it's not the way I would answer a lot of questions, so I think it's kind of easy to perceive him to be dogmatic, but I think if you ask him straight up, look, we have proof God exists, we have proof Jesus is the route to get there and stuff, he would hear it.
Well, it's funny that Hemant should say that, because just a few days prior to this event, Richard Dawkins was asked what would falsify his atheism. Here's what he said.
Or what it would take to convince me of anything supernatural. I find it very hard. I used to think it'd be easy. God would appear in clouds and chariots of fire and things.
Well, that's a start, isn't it?
I used to think that, but I've seen so many good conjuring tricks where you absolutely swear blind it's supernatural, and yet we know it's a trick. I suppose if Jesus came down in a chariot from a cloud, that would do it for me. But
I want that piece of video excerpted and put on YouTube.
I still think, actually, a more plausible explanation than anything supernatural is natural we don't yet understand, and so a trick wrought by an alien civilization that we don't know about yet or something is actually as implausible as it is. It is more plausible then the laws of physics have been violated, which is what we're kind of talking about when we talk about.
So Hemant said, we don't have a dogmatic belief. That's the other side.
Yep.
And then he said, of course, Dawkins would say he's very open. And of course, Dawkins says, look, even if God descends in a chariot, which is interesting that, that's the God that Richard Dawkins doesn't believe in. He's this like super being who is like the Loch Ness Monster. He lives, far away. He's mainly undetectable. Sometimes he might show up to true believers, but that's the kind of God that he thinks, God is. God's like the Loch Ness Monster, and it's just Christians happen to think that he exists. And he's a rational person who's, looked into the matter, and of course the Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist. But anyway, so that's the kind of gods that he thinks is there. But even if such a god shows up, he's like, well, can't be God, because we know God doesn't exist.
Well, it's interesting, isn't he? Because he says, and when he uses the example of conjuring tricks, he just says, well, we just know they're not real.
Right.
But of course, I mean, there is that. Of course, we do know that, but
yeah.
At what point do you
doubt?
Start saying,
yeah,
and surely there's so many things you could say. Well, if you start saying, well, we just know, this is not real, or we know that's. I mean,
sounds pretty dogmatic.
You're just excluding anything straight away,
right?
Or we just know,
right?
You're like, well,
yeah.
Sure.
And then when evidence is presented to your senses, you then say, but we can doubt our senses. And you're like, oh, okay, I understand why a rationalist might doubt their senses. Like the Greeks were brilliant at that. They kind of retreated into the mind in order to figure out the world. So Aristotle just thought very deeply about biology. He didn't actually do any biological tests. So this is why, because Aristotle thought very deeply about the world, and because he didn't trust his senses, because your senses can lie to you and there are optical illusions, and so let's retreat into the mind, because rationality has this mathematical perfection to it. So he thought really, really deeply about the nature of reality, and he said that bees must have 4 legs. Because it just seemed natural to him that bees must fit into this kind of taxonomy, and therefore, because they're in that category, they must be the same as these other animals that have 4 legs. And so he wrote down, bees have 4 legs, and it was taught for 1,000 years. Nobody thought to count the legs.
Maybe look at a bee.
Maybe look at a bee. Nobody thought to do that because they're all rationalists. And you just wonder, what are they doing? They're counting on the bee's legs, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4. Four legs. So the Greek mind is very much about retreating from the your sensory perceptions, because your sensory perceptions can lie, but rationality is iron, right? And so that's the kind of world they come up with. So they're always doubting their senses. But actually, the scientific method is based on saying, okay, I don't care what you think in here. Let's do the test. Let's count how many legs the bees have. Let's actually do the experiments and try and falsify our beliefs. And so it's actually all about experimental data.
Yep.
That's what the scientific method is based on. And then Richard Dawkins is asked, okay, if the experiment and the results come in, are you actually going to reconfigure your beliefs?
Sure.
No.
Yeah, he won't let the data change what he already has agreed on in his mind.
No. And that's what we're all like.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what we're all like. There's a good example. Andy might remember this. Andy's in the corner running the show here. But we once did a sunrise scene. We were filming a video, and we wanted to go to the beach to film sunrise. And so we got there at ridiculous o'clock in the morning. It was 4 in the morning or something, so that we could beat the sun. And we set up the camera, and we didn't have a timer, so I had to be there clicking it every 30 seconds to do the time lapse, right? So every 30 seconds I'm pressing it, every 30 seconds I'm pressing it. And an hour later, there's this massive ball of gold that emerges from the sea completely out of shot. I've only had 4 hours sleep. I'm getting up. I've set this whole thing up. Andy's gone somewhere else to take a shot from another angle. And there I am taking my shots. And this massive ball of golden light is emerging from the sea out of shot. And my first thought is, that can't be the sun. Literally. Because I know the sun is going to be there. I know that. I don't know what that thing is.
Definitely not
It
the
can't
sun.
be the sun.
No.
Literally. I don't know for how many seconds my brain was rationalizing this. But for let's say for 3.5 seconds, I was thinking, maybe it's a ship. Maybe it's Armageddon. Maybe it's a nuclear device exploding. I was like, but what it cannot ever be is it can't be the sun, because I know the sun will come
be
up
there.
right?
Yeah.
And so what is repentance?
And so what was it?
And it was an alien playing a trick on me. See? And that's what Richard Dawkins would say, because we know the sun must be there, and so whatever that is, that's got to be an alien.
Yeah,
and that's more plausible than me getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, but what is repentance? Repentance is saying, I'm wrong, I'm an idiot, oops, this entire project has been, misaligned, and then you change the camera.
And is that why we find it so hard to change? Because there is that admitting you're wrong thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there was that famous TED talk, wasn't there? The lady who says, "What does it feel like to be wrong?" And everyone's like, "Oh, it feels really rubbish to be wrong and whatnot." But actually, she said it feels exactly the same as
being right.
Because when you're wrong, you don't necessarily know you're
right.
You don't know you're
so like everyone was going like that. Yeah. She says, "No, that's the answer to a different question.
Yeah,
that's the answer to the question. What does it
know
feel like to know
when
that
you know you're wrong?"
Yeah.
And actually, that's the thing I think we all kind of we shy away from, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why we hold to our positions.
Right.
I mean, it is. You almost feel like to concede something is to back down and to lose face.
Right. 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 And so, the technical term for that these days is confirmation bias, and so you're always getting loads of information coming at you, and your brain is sifting it, but it's not sifting it neutrally, and so anything that confirms what you already believe, you put an incredible amount of store by that evidence, and anything that disconfirms your belief is like, but I'm sure if you did a more thorough study, I'm sure if the sample size was bigger, I'm sure if you had a more peer-reviewed study somewhere, it would contradict that. And so it's that thing. If you want something to be true, you ask, can I believe it? And the evidence bar, the bar for evidence is really low. If you don't want something to be true, you ask, must I believe it? And you set the evidence bar hugely high. But that's just the way everyone is. It's not just Richard Dawkins.
No, absolutely. It is absolutely the case.
But what's ironic about Dawkins et al. Is that their picture of humanity is that that's what we have become. We have evolved to this state where we can now
simply assess the data.
Right.
Pure reason.
Right.
Unbiased.
Unbiased.
Away from anything that might interfere with that assessment.
Our minds are like barcode readers, and we just, read the data, blip, 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 and just, kind of assemble our beliefs just purely from the facts. Just the facts, man. Just the facts. Which is just such a... I mean, no wonder the new atheists are kind of done down for being religious fundamentalists, because it's actually a really dogmatic position that's just kind of like, well, we have arrived. We are the bright ones. We are the enlightened ones.
Well, we've talked about it before, haven't we? Even just with the stupidest examples of the football managers.
Yes.
The football managers who have exactly the same data in front of them about, the penalty that was given.
Right.
And the one...
It was never a penalty.
It was never a penalty, and the other one says it was definitely a penalty, even though they watched exactly the same footage. And it's because one wants it to be true and the other one doesn't want it to be true.
Yeah.
And, that is such a stupid and trivial example.
Yeah.
But it's such an everyday...
Oh, yeah.
thing, it was never a foul, ref. Oh, it's totally a foul. Red card should have been off.
I see, and the Bible's just been talking about this from the garden.
Get-go, really.
From the garden. Adam and Eve make a mistake. The Lord shows up, and they say, fair cop, you got me, go. No. No, this woman you put here, and this snake that you put here, and it's like the man blames the woman blames the snake, and then the snake doesn't have a leg to stand on.
Hey, boom. Hades.
For those just joining us, you'll have to go back and figure out the Hades reference.
That reminds me of, the buck passing thing. Reminds me of, did I tell you about my favourite part of Exodus is when Moses comes down and sees the golden calf and he asks Aaron what happened. He says, I don't know, I just threw this gold into the fire and this calf just came out.
Out came this idol.
How did that happen?
That's my explanation for blogging. When people ask, how did you get into blogging? I say, I just clicked a few buttons at WordPress and out came this blog. Pretty much is how it happened. But yeah, that's what we're like. We don't take responsibility, and it's always somebody else's fault, and we play the blame game, and it's self-justification, which is why when I'm driving down the motorway, everyone who drives faster than me is a maniac, and everyone who drives slower than me is an idiot.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But I drive just
right.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's just the way we are, and like theologians have put lots of different names to this. So part of original sin is that we share in this Adam-like nature. We don't come into the world as these blank slates who are just calmly assessing the data. We come into the world as part of Adam's family, part of and as part of Adam's family, and then we're always trying to justify ourselves. So original sin is about this. The bondage of the will, just a massive deal around the Reformation. Certainly Luther versus Erasmus, he was saying, no, the will is bound. And what he meant was not that we don't do what we want to do. Luther was like, no, that's exactly what we always do. We always just do what we want to do. And we're just slaves to our desires, slaves to our hearts and all that sort of stuff. So, like, the Bible's been talking about this for millennia, and actually there's now much more of a scientific vocabulary around it in terms of confirmation bias. And, what's the, I don't know the technical term for it, but you know, like buyer's remorse. You buy something and then the fear of missing out is another big one. And they do studies of couples, and they ask the couples, like, how much housework do you do? And the woman typically says, I do a lot of housework, like 80%, and the man says, I do a lot of housework, like 40%. But what's interesting is when you get them both in a separate room, it always adds up to much more than 100%. Always, and we're always, and maybe in this next clip, we'll have a look at how some of the vocabulary we use around our own opinions has developed. And it starts off with one of my favorite clips about this whole issue. It's from The Man with Two Brains, where Steve Martin's wife is dead, and he's being kind of seduced by Kathleen Turner. And Kathleen Turner is bad news, and he shouldn't get together with her. And so he asks his dead wife whether he should pursue this relationship with Dolores, and the results are pretty funny.
Rebecca, if there's anything wrong with my feelings for Dolores, just give me a sign. Just any kind of sign. I'll keep on the lookout for it. Meanwhile, I'll just put you in the closet.
That's... Put you in the closet.
And that's everybody, really.
Yeah.
That is totally everybody. And especially when matters of the heart are at stake.
And, yeah, I mean, we go on to talk about the Jonathan Haidt elephant thing, isn't it? The elephant and the rider, where, we are like an elephant, a 6-ton elephant with the rider on top, and the rational brain is the rider up the top there, and the emotions of the elephant. Yeah. And we like to think we're the ones in charge, we're the rational ones, and we can control where we're going. But of course, actually, it's the 6-ton elephant that really has ultimate control over where we're going. Right. Actually, that's the same with us. Just like our emotions will override our rational, logical thinking. Right. But, it's not to say, I don't think we say in the video, it's not to say that we can't tug on the reins and pull one way or the other. But we're so driven by the emotions of stuff. Yeah, and in Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, which is a terrific read, but he sort of says, let's look at the human personality. Are we more like judges or defense lawyers? What's our brain? How does our brain function in our life? Is it more like a judge that's trying to assess each side of every argument and come up with the truth? Or are our brains basically the defense lawyers for our egos? That basically, our entire job is to defend our ego no matter what. Yep.
Like, which rings true? Like, you know.
Hey, why are you being so defensive? You know,
Yeah.
Don't go on the defensive. Yeah, absolutely.
Or he gives this other illustration of where we're not like these truth-seeking reporters who are trying to be journalists just after the truth. We're much more like the press secretary. Like, imagine the president's press secretary. What's her name? Sarah Huckabee Sanders?
Yeah.
Imagine having her job.
She's earning her money.
You could not pay that woman enough. Because think about her job. What is her job? Her job is to defend everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. Isn't that amazing that there's such a person who's tasked with that? You know,
can never admit.
Yeah, you can never admit that. Yeah, you can never say, fair enough. You're probably right. Donald will be out later for an apology.
But as I say, it's everyone. I mean, I've hit a low point in my life that in the car on the way to work, I started listening to Radio 4.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the level I've hit now.
From 2?
From 2.
Yeah, so you were already on the slide.
Leapt over.
You were already on the slide.
You're only on the morning, though. You can't listen on the way back. It's not worth it at that time of day. But it's always like some political thing in the morning, and they're always talking to a politician, Theresa May today, Philip Hammond yesterday, and all kinds of people. And they ask them questions, and you sit there and you think, you've not answered that question.
No.
And they never even admit to the possibility that something might be slightly off, that they could have got that wrong.
I know. Wouldn't it be so refreshing, though, if they did?
We really stuffed that up,
That's
actually.
a good question. Yeah. Yeah. We haven't done any of the costing on this.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, yeah, even just a simple no. Yes or no. Yeah. You know, but you can't save face. Like, you have to save face.
You
the whole
have to
time.
save
You
face.
Can't,
it's
you
all
can't
about that.
Concede any kind of weakness.
Yeah.
But it all comes over as so fake. You know, it's just empty words in the end.
I know.
Rhetoric, so.
I know. And okay, I've said something negative about Donald Trump. Let's, maybe part of the appeal of Donald Trump is that he's this guy who just doesn't care.
Yeah,
he doesn't care what you think. Doesn't mean he doesn't lie, but he just doesn't care what you think. You know, and he doesn't care about your accusations of him lying either. But he'll just say it.
Yep.
So, I mean, another bit of sort of technical language that Jonathan Haidt speaks of is the difference between argumentation theory and argumentative theory. So Jonathan Haidt will say, it used to be the case, we used to think that the way humanity ascended towards truth was by argumentation, and I'll state my case and you'll state your case, and synthesis, antithesis, here we go, like thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and we'll just keep ascending to truth through these argumentations. But he said that's totally getting overtaken in all the scientific literature by argumentative theory.
Right.
So with argumentative theory, I don't care what's right. I'm just going to win.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's more about, is this going back to some of the stuff we talked about before about, it's really about who shouts louder and who's bigger and stronger can overpower the other side. Right.
And when I'm in an argument, do I say something like, is truth my goal or is winning my goal? Right. Most of the time it's winning, isn't it? And actually, a lot of, obviously these scientists are kind of working from a purely Darwinian kind of paradigm, in which case actually winning is everything.
Yeah.
Truth can take the hindmost. Who cares about truth if I've got to survive, I've got to mate, I've got to reproduce my DNA. I'm not really after truth, I'm just after winning.
Yeah, sure.
So if all our minds and all our social interactions are the process of just trying to win over multiple generations, why would we ever think that actually our brains are fit to just look for the truth?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Jonathan Haidt is a great friend of Christians, actually, because I think he's just pointing to some really ancient wisdom from the scriptures, the bondage of the will, and like in the history of the church, Anselm said, actually, the way we know things is it's faith seeking understanding.
Right.
So it's faith. I've already got a creed in my head.
Yeah.
I already believe in Jesus. I trust in him. But I'm seeking to unpack that and account for, well, what about this and what about that? And so it's I've already got axioms. I've already got presuppositions. And then off I go into the world. And he's just being honest about that. That's the way we are. It's not that. It's understanding that leads to faith. It's faith seeking understanding.
Sure.
Or, you know, what you mentioned in the video, Thomas Cranmer, like one way of summarizing Cranmer is what the heart loves, the will chooses, and the mind justifies.
Yeah.
And it's that, and the mind comes last, you know. And it's just the truth, you know. Like if you spend a decent amount of money on a purchase, and someone comes and says, "Oh, you wasted your money on that, didn't you?" Actually, we're far more likely to say, "Oh no, it was a good purchase. It was wise. And we'll defend ourselves because but it's always a post hoc. It's always after the fact that we kind of defend ourselves and we justify it. And so I think all the scientific stuff these days is kind of like aligning with these ancient truths. I've been watching a really interesting TED talk by Donald Hoffman. Donald Hoffman, he kind of talks about how do we see reality as it is, and Hoffman he's run all these experiments on a purely Darwinian model, and he kind of says, imagine these different societies in which, one society can try to win, survive. One society can try to seek for the truth and what the reality of the situation is. And he says in hundreds of thousands of these mathematical models, it's always the survival one that wins. It's always argumentative theory that wins over argumentation. It's just we're not that rational. So it's just ironic when you atheists, there's all sorts of different atheisms, and not every atheism at all falls for this kind of view, but the new atheism totally does. It's like Hemant Mehta saying, "No, we're not dogmatic. That's the other side."
Yeah.
All the while, nothing would convince him that he's wrong.
Yeah. And fair play. We say at the end of the video as well.
Yeah.
We fall just for that. We fall for that just as much as anyone.
Yeah,
so.
We do. And but then I just sort of say, well, okay, we've got a disagreement about God. So new atheists and Christians have a disagreement about God. All right, fine, we can carry on that debate as well. But we've also got a disagreement about humans. And I just think it's demonstrably true that the new atheists get humans wrong.
Yeah, that is something which you can assess. That you can look at and see.
I think so. Well, we had some comments on the video last night, and I thought it'd just be good to have a look at some of them. We had a few comments from Richard Suttles, who's been interacting really well, and I've learnt lots from interacting with Richard over the last week or so. And he says, on screenshot number 1, he says, "I agree that atheists can be just as dogmatic as any religious person. Some key metrics for dogmatism within the atheist camp: that all religion must be eliminated. That's sort of dogma 1. Dogma 2, that people can completely remove their own biases and achieve pure reason. Admittedly, some religious people also think this is possible. And then dogma 3, that religious people suffer from a mimetic virus, whilst atheists have had that virus removed, either from other atheists or just by thinking it through, or that atheists are just immune to it because of their strong critical thinking skills." So just real candor there from Richard, who himself identifies as an atheist, but I don't think he'd identify as a new atheist. Would you, Richard? You could maybe leave a comment, but it sounds to me like you wouldn't want to identify, certainly with the anthropology that we've been talking about, that Hemant and Richard Dawkins subscribe to. So that's really refreshing. I think we could do the same with some of the dogmatisms of Christians, and I think Christians also, we get our anthropology wrong too at times, especially we can carry on as though people are just rational decision-making individuals who they just need to make a choice for Jesus, which is a really Enlightenment thing, and I think evangelicalism falls into this massively.
Well, and haven't you got into a few scrapes with kind of Christian apologists?
Yes,
who are very much of the opinion we get the evidence for
right.
the resurrection.
Right.
Here's why the resurrection can be believed.
Right.
Here's why
right.
this happened. We can be sure, etc., etc.
Right.
Right. As if that is the thing that will take people across the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it was you who was saying, interestingly, so we do apologetics now for the resurrection. So we say,
right.
Here's the reasons the resurrection can be believed.
Evidence for the resurrection.
Evidence for the resurrection. Whereas someone like Paul
in Acts 17.
His apologetic for believing in Christ is the resurrection.
The resurrection.
He doesn't feel the need to be like...
That is his evidence.
Yeah, he says the resurrection. There you go. Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah.
So it's like we've stepped another step back from that,
right?
If not a few.
Right. And I think particularly with evangelicalism, and that's my tribe, is that there's an idea that the gospel is an idea that just needs to be spread, and as long as you have that idea in your head, you're cool, you're golden, and we are more resistant to church and structure and institution and liturgy and an embodied life of discipleship and that sort of thing. Is our temptation is always just to say, oh well, the gospel is an idea that is to be communicated person to person, and that's obviously caricaturing, but I think that is a danger. And it starts to sound very much like the Enlightenment philosophy that the New Atheists also have.
And the thing that strikes me, like in people I know who've come to church recently, who aren't necessarily Christians but have come to church, the thing that's always struck them most has always been like, oh, people were so welcoming, and it was more to do with the way people were living their lives and the way they engaged them,
right?
Rather than, I've very rarely heard someone just say immediately, oh well, they said something in the talk and that was immediately the thing that's
right.
I mean that does happen,
right?
But more often than not, it was coming into that community and going, like,
it wasn't the idea that changed them, and then they've got this new dogma. Because that would be as though we are all just riders. We chatter away as riders, and our riders are making our decisions for us.
Yeah.
And I think what actually herds our elephants in a similar direction is community. It's embodied church life. It's going the way of Jesus. It's, and so, we finished the video last night, with Paul suggesting, why don't you commit yourself to a year of prayer and a year of throwing yourself into church life and all those sorts of things. So Richard, in his next comment, he actually comments on that. He says, as for Paul's advice on the metrics for really being open-minded, that is prayer, community, immersion in scripture and narratives, this is how all groups work. And he says, we had 3 LDS visitors, that's Mormons, in our home last week, including the bishop for the local ward. He said, I promise you, if you read the Book of Mormon and truly pray about it and spend time with us as part of our community, and if you do this diligently and sincerely every day, you will come to see our faith as truth. And I said, you're absolutely right, we would. But that would also be the case for Jehovah's Witnesses or Scientology or even the New Atheism. Groups are all about keeping their ideals alive, and humans are great for making that happen because we are all naturally adept at social learning. We are even better at that than rational thinking. So true. So open-mindedness might remain elusive for all of us. We might all improve our critical thinking skills through awareness and research and listening to people with disconfirming views, but we might also have to concede that our own worldview might not be the pure, objective truth. And this applies to me just as much as you. I think that's just so true. And again, I think this is kind of the Protestant danger. The Protestant danger, I think we have rightly said that the church can err, and therefore we need the gospel to judge the church. The church always needs to be living by the gospel. But then the danger is that we divorce the gospel from the church, and so we just have this idea, and we're just communicating ideas. Whereas I think we need the community together with the truth, so that our truth is communally inhabited and understood, and our communities are living by that truth. So that's what I said to Richard on the next picture. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, the idea of living the gospel.
Yeah. Which
actually, on a lot of kind of Protestant understanding, is would be a really weird thing to say. Because you'd be like, what do you mean living this doctrine?
Yeah.
Because what do you mean living 2 ways to live out? Like that would be kind of what people would...
It is to speak. You speak the gospel.
Live it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting trying to get your head around that, isn't it? And trying to think how the danger is that we fall foul of stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's important to distinguish and to say the root is the gospel and the fruit is this kind of life and this kind of community. But a root and a fruit shouldn't be severed either. you know, and we need to keep them together. So I responded to Richard, yes, communities of faith are vital for upholding that faith. Practice and belief must go together. Perhaps this is why Jordan Peterson's stealing a lot of Sam Harris's audience. Peterson insists that the truth be embodied. It's got to be because the word became flesh. So the truth must be communally inhabited. But what I challenge the cults with, and because he mentions cults, doesn't he? He mentions JWs and Mormons and Scientologists. I think there is a challenge to them. We've got to insist that those communities be truth-based. The Mormons and the JWs will keep out books from beyond their community. Scientologists likewise don't like lights shone throughout their community. At that point, it's not a community of truth. We've got to have both. So if the objection is, any community can rationalize any truth. So if you just inhabit like a Mormon church for a year, you just become a Mormon.
Become a Mormon, yeah, sure.
My pushback on that would just be actually the trouble with Mormonism is that they are not open to truth. They won't read the literature that you give to them. It all is kept within the community, so that the community shields them from the truth rather than helps them to investigate the truth. I think that's the problem with the cults. So, yes, we need communities of faith, communities that live by the truth, but they also need to be investigating that truth. And then Richard said this. He said, sorry for being the multi-post guy, but this video you guys just made is probably one of my favorite Christian clips of all time. Well, hey!
Win.
Kudos to both of you for embracing scientific literature that points out our inherent irrationality. I understand many Christians also agree we have that stain, but so often we see Christian apologists fighting the new atheism mantra of "we're the purely rational ones" with "no, we're the purely rational ones."
Yeah.
It's amazing that actually humans aren't rational is a third narrative that many believers and non-believers reject first and foremost before they return to arguing with each other over which worldview is based on reason. And I don't know how to articulate those emojis, but you've got to see them. They're good. They're good. On a final note, Pastor Tim Keller, who I'm a big fan of, said last year in a debate with Jonathan Haidt, a debate in which they both chose not to debate, Keller said that if the science is correct about our inherent irrationality, then Christianity would provide the best explanation for that. I would say so too. As Pastor Keller explained, because I understand our human nature, I know for a fact that atheists and people of other religions can behave better than me. This was a powerful statement that many Christians struggle with. It is counterintuitive. But if we are inherently irrational, then the best explanation for our existence will include the observations of our demonstrably inconsistent thoughts and actions. I totally agree. And something that we're going to get into next week, actually, because we're going to return to the Hemant, Mehta, Sean Mcdowell video on the subject of morality. And I think it's just so true that I can say to an atheist, oh, you can be far more moral than me. And you can be far more consistent, like, rationally than I am. But it's because I do think that there's a standard that judges both me and my atheist friend. But actually, yeah, it is powerful. It's a powerful move to say, well, of course you can be better than me. Of course you can be more thoughtful than me. But let's look at why that might be the case. And a Christianity that includes our own messed upness and our own bondage of the will and original sin, I think that's a powerful way forward that hopefully avoids some of the new atheist versus Christian evidentialist quagmire. Anyway, that's a hope. That'll do for now, I think. We can have a look at some other comments next week. But next week, what are we going to look at, Paul?
What are we looking at next week? What in terms of the video?
Yeah, the morality video.
Yeah, so we're returning, as you said, to Hemant and Sean. Although a lot of it actually we're focusing back to a previous discussion Hemant had on Unbelievable with Leah Libresco, wasn't it? A number of years ago, probably about 6 years ago.
Yeah, 2012. Yeah,
like that. So about morality and where does Hemant in particular, I suppose, ground his morals.
Yes. We're thinking of calling the video "Where Do You Get Your Trousers From?"
Which, if you watch, next week, you'll understand.
You'll understand
why we've gone down that road of where'd you get your trousers from.
So I've got. What are you talking about? I've got trousers. My trousers are fine. No, but where do you get your trousers
Sick
from?
of you questioning my trousers. Right.
Only you and I know what we're laughing at. But anyway, you'll see. All will be revealed. And so do keep praying for us. So right now I'm going to get in a car and go up to Cambridge, and I'm preaching tonight in Cambridgeshire, and then tomorrow night for the Christian Union there. And you're speaking on Friday, is that right?
Friday and Sunday, yep. So I'm speaking at a youth group in Crowborough in my hometown on Friday night on Genesis 16, God Who Sees Me. And then I'm speaking at a church in Eastbourne Sunday morning on Exodus 11 and 12.
Brilliant.
So which has been a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah.
In getting
the plagues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just the last plague.
Just
really.
the last plague, yeah.
And this one, the last.
And I will, this time next week, I will be up in Newcastle, helping them with a mission. So Jesmond Parish Church is reaching out to Newcastle. I'm going to be interviewing Tim Farron and Warren Furman and a few other people.
Do you know who Warren Furman is?
Ace from Gladiators.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. I don't know why he didn't just call himself Warren on the show, but... He was
Shadow, Nighthawk, and Warren.
Yeah. So I'll be talking to him, and it should be good, and reaching out with the good news. So,
Great.
Good.
Sounds fun.
Hope you all survive Freshers Week.
Go and get a free spatula.
That's right, yeah. Survivors, we reconvene here on Tuesday, so see you then. Bye.
Take care. See you.